Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of The Rundown. I'm Sunny Galt. I'm a messenger with United Network News. We are the news division of United Network, and we are also part of CARE, the Center for Amity and Restoration of Earth. And our mission is to bring you the real news. And we put out a lot of content throughout the week. We have our amazing field messengers, which I'm going to tell you a little bit more about them in just a bit. We have a news team that puts together some in-depth news stories for you guys. We talk about the restoration of our planet, and we have updates from the Global Intelligence Agency as far as what's really happening here on our planet in this ultimate battle of good versus evil. So if you want more information on who we are, what we do, visit our website, unitednetwork.earth. This podcast is a week in review show. So I go over the top stories that we discuss throughout the week. So if you may have missed something, if you regularly watch UNN and maybe you missed a day, this is a great way to get caught up. Maybe just a quick review of the stories, even if you watched everything. And also, if you've never taken the time to share UNN with someone you think it might resonate with, I encourage you guys to do that. This podcast is a great way to do that because it's absolutely free and kind of gives them like a little snapshot of UNN. Of course, it's just audio, so it's just kind of like a little teaser, right? And if they want more, they can check us out. With all of the content we release, and this is something I would encourage you guys to follow with any kind of content that you're listening to or you're watching. Think critically, ask questions, and kind of figure out what makes sense to you. Because we're all on like a different track, right? We're all trying to, I view this as like a big puzzle people are trying to fit together because our world doesn't make sense. So you go down this rabbit hole and you get that piece of the puzzle and then you try to fit it in with everything else. And there's a lot of misinformation and disinformation out there too, because there's people that are specifically trying to lead you astray as well as other people that are just trying to figure stuff out. So think critically. You have discernment. I talk about this all the time. It's a built-in lie detector built in within your body because truth and fiction or lies, it's all just frequency. So the moment you can start to recognize those frequencies, no one can pull the wool over your eyes. You will be able to see quickly. You'll be able to sense right from wrong, truth from fiction. And that's the safe spot to be in right now, okay? And when you figure something out, share what you know with other people because that's how we're going to learn. That's how we're all going to grow. So let's get to the stories. Here's the rundown of stories you may have missed this week on UNN. So I mentioned our field messengers, and if you want to learn a little bit more about what our field messengers do, you can check out our website. We've got a whole section dedicated to our field messengers and their reports because they are really the heart and soul of what UNN is about. And this week, we really got to see a snapshot of what the future holds for kind of this merger, this blending of the news stories that we've always done and the information from our field messengers, because that's really always been the vision for UNN, is to collect firsthand accounts of what's going on in the world. And sometimes it makes sense for us to do one story using several people's sound bites and create a news story out of it. Sometimes it makes sense for you guys just to share what's going on in your own backyard, whatever that might be. And maybe that's just a story that's just you, just sharing what's going on. And so this week, we got a chance to kind of do some experimenting with that. And I'll talk a little bit more about that when we get to our regular news stories, because our field messengers were a big part of that. And that was really exciting, I think, for all of us to see this week. But let's first start off with the stories that you guys submitted that, are your own stories that we, our production team, helped put together. So let's kick things off with Susan. And Susan's out of Sweden, and she was vacationing in the Faroe Islands. And she was actually staying at the place of a very well-known writer and painter. And hopefully I get this name right, William Hennessy. And yeah, very well known. He has a house over there. Well, he did. He's no longer with us. I think he passed away in the early 90s. And Susan was able to stay there. She actually talked with a guide and was talking, who actually kind of knew him, saw him. I don't think she ever talked to him, but remembers him as a child. And he used to call himself a picture maker. I thought that was really interesting. Not a writer or a painter, but a picture maker. But obviously a lot more than that, because he's written a lot of books. And it's just interesting to learn a little bit more about this individual and be able to stay where he lives. So very interesting report from Susan. Emma from Spain gives us a report about the volcanic architecture in Fuerteventura. Now, she talks about traditional Canarian houses. A lot of these are built from volcanic rock. Also limestone, there's some wood, and they basically blend these and make these really beautiful homes. And she talks about how these homes really adapt well to the climate, how they're structured. She says a lot of these homes have been around for more than 200 years. So if you've ever seen volcanic rock, it's actually very light. It sounds like it would be heavy. It's not. It's very porous, right? There's a lot of what seems to be like holes in it, right? But the area, it's perfect for the area. It's very conducive to the environment there. It has minimal maintenance for the homes that have this kind of material. They design it extremely well. I think that's one of the big things that we're going to end up going back to is how are we constructing our homes? And does it even make sense? Right? And she says in these homes, air naturally flows throughout the house. Doesn't make a lot of sense. Like, where are we putting our windows? Are we putting it right where the sun shines in and could really heat the house? Maybe when you don't want the house to be heated, right? We got to think about these things. Of course, she also says new homes in that area don't have the same quality. Wham, 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 right? I think we're all kind of in that boat where we've seen the quality of homes go down. All right, Amy out of New Jersey, she goes on a little quest, I guess. She goes on a trail. Okay, it's called the Ferry Trail. It's a half-mile path in a mountain reservation in New Jersey, and it invites families to build these little tiny homes. Now, when I say tiny, guys, I'm talking about like a mouse could fit into it. But here's the thing. You have to make it from natural materials. Now, why are they doing this? Well, the name of the trail is the Ferry Trail, right? So the idea is that you're giving back to the ferries. You are providing housing for the ferries. Now, this might seem really far out there to a lot of people. Ferries are not mythical creatures. They just exist in another dimension. There's a lot of things that we have not really been told. A lot of things that are part of our folklore actually are true. You know, all the stories we tell our kids about magical unicorns. I almost said uniforms. Maybe there are magical uniforms out there. Magical unicorns and mermaids and elves and fairies and gnomes, those are real. Those are actually real. And you're like, Sunny, you've gone crazy. They're real. They're here. They've always been here. So it's not like this trail is that far off. It's very interesting. You know, there are rules if you're going to make these little homes for the fairies. You have to respect nature. Like I said, the house has to blend into nature and someone approves it. So someone, I don't know who that is, someone has to approve this, and you don't want to disturb nature around it. But it's very interesting to walk along this trail. Of course, Amy shows us all around, and there's some really interesting homes for those fairies. All right, Desmond out of West Africa shows us this mystery dance in Togo, which is in West Africa. And these dancers from these different tribes, they are basically bringing this dance to life. They have these really energetic moves and rhythms, a lot of drums, flutes are being played as well. And it's just a celebration of their culture. And it's something both men and women can do. In the video, it looked like the men kind of had their own circle and the women had their own circle, but they wore these special adornments around their ankles. They wore very vivid colors, And yeah, they were just having the time of their lives. Sometimes I really wish, like Western culture, specifically here in the US, if I asked my husband to like, hey, let's go dancing, you know how guys typically are. And then I see people like this just having so much fun without all the stigma, right? And so many times, because I have a dance background, and so many times I'm like, why can't we just let loose and have fun like this? This just looked like they're having the time of their life. And now I really want to go to West Africa and do this dance. All right, Sophia from Trinidad and Tobago talks about some fun things that happen on Sunday mornings. There's actually a program where kids and their parents go to the beach and they learn how to surf under the guidance of a local parent. And this takes place, I think it's about a 3-hour period. I don't know if it's every Sunday. It probably depends on the weather. And it's just a beautiful story. And Sophia talks to the person who started the program and why he does it. And yeah, just a lot of love. And if you want to see some really fun kids learning how to surf, definitely check out that story. Rick takes a visit to Kenya, and he goes to this unique lodge in Kenya's Aberdare National Park. They call it the Ark, you guys. This is really something that you have to see to really understand, right? But they go on this bridge to get to this lodge where they're staying. And you can only go on the bridge on certain times. And the reason is because this bridge, it goes over like a lot of jungly kind of terrain before it gets to this lodge. And all of these natural, like animals in their natural habitats exist on the other side where this lodge is. This is why they call it the Ark, okay? I didn't see any animals going 2 by 2, but I did see a lot of really cool animals that you probably wouldn't be able to see up close and personal if it weren't for the fact that there was a large watering hole and a salt lick right next to that lodge. So what a fun trip. You know, Rick is out of Arizona, and most of his stories come from Arizona. So obviously this was a trip that he took, and it just looked like a blast. Atsuko from Japan talks about rice farming. And this is very interesting because she shares the inspiring story of her uncle who built stone-walled rice terraces that blend tradition with innovation. And the end result was creating sustainable, high-quality rice for future generations. So it was really cool because her uncle's still around. She was able to interview him, and he shared his vision and what he did. Some beautiful video from this area. And again, just sharing other parts of the world and what are some of the land struggles, you know, that they're having, you know, with their crops and whatever. And this was just, her uncle did something really cool to help preserve their way of life for future generations. Very cool. Monica out of Romania talks about the stabilopods. Okay, now that's not some crazy underwater creature, but you can look this up, and I encourage you guys to do this. So part of Romania's coastline is filled with these stabilopods. Now, what is it? It is a star-shaped concrete structure, and they were designed to protect the Black Sea coast from powerful storms. And it's a fascinating story of how they came up with this design, but it was specifically because the Black Sea, you know, you've got these waves that are coming in. I think they said 7 to 8 meter waves, and they needed to deal with the break of those waves, you know, hitting the land. And it's based upon the structure of a grape that is still on the vine, like connected to other grapes. Right? And how they're strung together. And when they're strung together, they support one another. And again, if it weren't for this, Romania's coastline would look drastically different. Do you ever see something? These are the great field messenger reports. You see something and you're like, why is that like that? There's probably a unique story behind it. And this is one of those stories. Very cool. And our final field messenger report is from Emma. We're going back to Fuerteventura. Emma produces a lot of reports for us, and we absolutely love it. So this report is about the sand dunes of Coralejo, again, in Fuerteventura. And it has these stunning white beaches, And it's set up right against these turquoise waters, just gorgeous natural parks, right? And people come from all around to see this. She says it's about 90% coral sand. Everything's organic. It's just gorgeous. If you just want to see beautiful sandy beaches and amazing water, this is a report to check out. So earlier, I was telling you guys, we had a little bit of a breakthrough this week and another vision of what UNN is to become happened. And that is our news team coming together with our field messengers to really, I think this is the first time we've really done this in a news report. And, I don't think anything is coincidence. There's a lot of turmoil. We're going to talk about that in a little bit in the GIA report, but you guys can feel it, right? There's a lot of turmoil in our world right now. I have a feeling a lot of power structures are starting to crumble. And this is when resources like UNN become imperative, really, moving forward. We've said this over and over again, that you guys are the news, and we are changing the face of what news looks like, because news in the past, it was completely designed to make you feel a certain way. They even put frequencies behind newscasts, you guys. It's called a newscast for a reason, or a broadcast for a reason. They literally put frequencies behind these programs, and they're called programs because they are training your brain to think a certain way. This is literally what news was designed to do. So if you're going to change that, what you need to do is get rid of the whole structure and just have people talking to people again. That's what our field messengers are all about. Now, sometimes we have these stories that really need to be told from multiple viewpoints. And the first news story we're going to talk about today is just that. It is the Canada Post strike. Okay, so the Canada Post is the mail system, okay, in Canada, and they are on strike. And this is affecting how people get their mail. So it's a big story, and Canada is a big place. And we're going to talk about the story in just a little bit, but there's a lot of information. People are experiencing different things. What someone experiences on one side of the country is different than the other side of the country. So we're going to see this more and more. In fact, we are starting to plan for it. So we've always had a weekly field messenger meeting. And this last week, I joined the group, and I'm going to be joining as much as I possibly can moving forward. Right now, the meetings are on Sunday, so this is my time. I'm on Pacific time in the U.S. They are Sundays at 3 p.m. So if you guys want to learn more about these meetings, anyone that's listening, you are welcome to join, and I hope you do. Our goal is to grow our field messengers so that we have field messengers all over the world sharing their stories. And so I'm going to be attending these meetings moving forward as much as possible. And the idea is to go through story ideas and see which ones are more collaborative. And we really had a chance this week to test this out with the Canada Post strike. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to tell you about this story just like I do with most of these news reports. And I'm going to play a soundbite. This soundbite, the first soundbite that we're going to play is actually from a field messenger. But just know you're going to start to see more and more of these stories because the traditional mainstream media is going to start to fall away. And then it's just us talking to one another and sharing those stories again. So here's what's going on with the Canada Post. They are on strike again. This is their second walkout in less than a year over a government transformation plan. That's what the government's calling it. That would cut door-to-door delivery, reduce service frequency, and close some rural post offices. The Postal Workers Union says these changes threaten jobs, fair wages, and public service quality, while Canada Post argues it's under major financial strain amid failing mail volumes and growing parcel competition. Now, rotating strikes are disrupting deliveries across the country, with workers walking out in different regions at different times to keep pressure on management. I'm going to play a soundbite from one of our field messengers about what she is seeing when it comes to these rotating strikes.
Today I checked out 4 Canada post offices to see what was happening, and currently the Canadian postal strike in British Columbia, as of October 2025, the Canadian Union of Postal Workers, the CUPW, has transitioned from a full national strike to a rolling one. And now you can see that the mail delivery is mostly restored as of October 11th, although certain areas might still experience some delays. They're having kind of rotating strikes, like I said, so I didn't see any in the 4 that I visited locally within a half an hour radius.
Now, that was from our field messenger, Annette. She's based in Hope, British Columbia, and that's on the southern part of the province. Again, we had field messengers across Canada report different things. They're all hitting delays. Residents, it's affecting small businesses and those in rural areas the hardest, especially people relying on P.O. boxes or waiting for pension and benefit checks. Neither side is breaking down, though, or backing down, I should say, on this whole strike issue. So Canadians are left in limbo as the standoff continues to stall mail and raise questions about the future of postal service nationwide. Kenya's healthcare system is facing growing inequality despite years of investment aimed at expanding access and improving care. The International Finance Corporation, or IFC, it's part of the World Bank Group, has funneled millions into private for-profit hospitals across Kenya and East Africa. These are projects that brought modern facilities, but largely priced out low-income patients.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, I think if you had come in with expectations of making wild profits, especially in countries, where people's earnings are a bit lower, it's a very tough thing to do because your market clearly is very restricted. In a country like Kenya, you do have some very wealthy members of society, but they are restricted to the top 1%, sometimes even less, that people can actually afford these hospitals. And insurance coverage is very weak.
Reports show profit pressures have driven up treatment costs, led to medical debt, and even resulted in unlawful patient detentions for unpaid bills. At the same time, Kenya's new social health authority, it's the SHA, created to replace the National Health Insurance Fund, is struggling to pay hospitals, with more than 76 billion shillings in unpaid claims crippling rural, private, and faith-based facilities. Many hospitals have suspended services, leaving millions without essential care. The crisis highlights how profit-driven healthcare and poor public financing are deepening inequality and putting Kenya's most vulnerable at risk. Well, after years of remote work reshaping office life, many companies, especially in the U.S., are now enforcing strict return-to-office mandates, and it's creating major tension between employers and employees. What started as a pandemic necessity became a preferred lifestyle for millions who found themselves more productive and balanced working from home. But by this year, 2025, 85% of companies have attendance policies. It's like you're back in school, right? And nearly 70% are tracking who shows up, often using technology to monitor compliance. Some corporations claim returning boosts collaboration and culture, but studies suggest it's also been used to quietly reduce staff, with turnover jumping 14% after mandates, especially among women and senior employees.
Okay, let's take about 30 seconds and talk about return to office mandates and how they're ridiculous. So over COVID, when everyone had work from home, all of these companies, all of them, made record profits. And now the CEOs, who are completely out of touch, don't understand what's going on in a day-to-day life, have offices built for them 5 minutes from their house with state-of-the-art everything, are now saying that people need to come to work because they're not getting enough work done. This is not a return to office mandate. This is what we call a voluntary layoff program.
Meanwhile, heavy tracking systems have sparked frustration and burnout, leading some companies like AT&T and Microsoft to scale back on this enforcement. As workers push for flexibility and autonomy, the debate over where and how people work best is still far from over. Latin America faces severe environmental challenges, including extreme weather, deforestation, and land degradation. But agroforestry, you can look it up, offers a promising solution. Communities managing edible landscapes, that's what they're called, which are basically biodiverse agroforestry systems, oversee around 200 million hectares, yet only a fraction is legally recognized despite studies showing these lands overlap with global biodiversity hotspots and have lower deforestation rates. In Brazil's Pará state, much deforestation comes from clearing small farms for cattle pastures. But initiatives like the Green Path program and the Forest Cacao Project are restoring degraded land, boosting sustainable crop production and increasing family incomes. By integrating diverse native plants and crops like cocoa, corn, and acai, these nature-based systems improve soil health, conserve forests, and enhance food security, demonstrating how local knowledge and sustainable farming can build resilient ecosystems globally.
Bueno. Quiterio
Aquino is one of the Treebank's poorest farmers. He says his farm no longer produces much because the soil is just too worn out. Even the weeds are sparse. To restore the harvest, we created a highly productive multi-cropping system on about 1 acre of the farm. The system includes around 20 different crops. This new kind of farming should keep the soil healthy. It will easily feed Quiterio's family, and it should prevent the farm's last patches of forest from being cut.
In Serbia, people with disabilities face severe barriers to independent living, with limited access to community-based support, and many forced into underfunded, overcrowded state institutions or psychiatric homes. Of the roughly 350,000 people with disabilities, more than 80,000 need daily assistance. Yet poverty, negative stereotypes, and inadequate health care further restrict access to essential services. Supported living programs exist in only a handful of municipalities, serving just a few dozen people, while funding cuts have pushed others back into institutional care. Conditions in state-run homes are often poor, with reports of restraints, isolation, and overcrowding. And families fear their loved ones are treated as objects rather than individuals. Despite Serbia ratifying the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities in 2009, political will for deinstitutionalization remains weak, with local job interests and slow implementation preventing meaningful progress toward inclusive, community-based care. Lobbying, especially in the U.S., wields enormous influence over laws and policies that affect our everyday life, from drug prices to infrastructure, with powerful industries spending billions to shape decisions in their favor. While legal under the First Amendment, it's actually written into the Constitution, lobbying allows corporations, trade groups, and interest organizations to guide legislation, regulations, and public spending, often tilting outcomes toward big business. Now, the pharmaceutical sector alone spent $388 million in 2024, at least those are the numbers that they're telling us, to protect their profits, influence drug pricing, and limit government negotiation powers, directly affecting Americans' access to medicine.
When you're talking about reducing the cost of care or improving the quality of care, you are talking about threatening the revenue streams of high-cost, low-quality providers. Every dollar or pound of high-cost, low-quality care is a dollar or pound of income to somebody, and that somebody has a lobbyist, and they will lobby to block the reforms that you want to enact. And that is why healthcare stagnates in every country where the government takes over.
Lobbying often operates with limited transparency, aided by revolving door relationships. You've seen these, where former officials move between government and industry roles, including the media, raising concerns about accountability. Understanding these mechanisms empowers the public to demand transparency and hold decision makers accountable, showing that while lobbying is powerful, informed citizens can shape the system too. Despite trillions spent on flood control, the Philippines continues to face devastating floods each typhoon season, with communities submerged and families stranded. Much of the funding meant for infrastructure has been lost to corruption, with poorly built or ghost projects, meaning the project never happened, enriching contractors and politicians instead of protecting citizens.
Today, a flood control corruption scam worth billions of pesos is hitting the Public Works Department, and an investigation is underway. The Philippines loses a significant portion of its annual budget to corruption. Estimates say around 200 billion is lost every year to corruption. Others peg the loss at 20% of the annual spending plan, or about 1.6 trillion pesos based on the 2024 budget. Corruption in flood control projects is estimated to have cost the economy around 42 to 118 billion pesos in the last 2 years, with some reports suggesting that up to 70% of government funds meant for flood control projects have been stolen.
Between 2000 and 2024, storms and floods caused the majority of disasters in the Philippines, destroying crops and causing billions of dollars in damages, while essential services like health, education, and military funding suffered. Investigations reveal collusion, overpriced contracts, and funds diverted for political campaigns, sparking massive public outrage and protests in major cities. Experts warn that similar corruption schemes affect other infrastructure sectors, including roads and schools, highlighting a systemic problem that continues to hinder development and public safety. Hostile architecture. Have you seen this? It's also called anti-homeless design. Uses subtle but deliberate features like benches with armrests every few inches, spikes under bridges, or concrete barriers to prevent people from resting, sleeping, or lingering in public spaces. While often framed as maintaining neat and orderly environments, these designs disproportionately harm people experiencing homelessness, pushing them further from safety and support and making daily survival even harder.
If these kind of design choices of hostile architecture are becoming more and more prevalent, how much is all of this costing us? Well, despite scouring all of the corners of the far-reaching parts of the internet, I found that there actually wasn't a comprehensive study that looks at this from a monetary standpoint. But public knowledge is that in 2021, the city of Portland alone spent approximately $500,000 installing anti-homeless benches around just one park. So if we suppose that each of the U.S.'s 795 major metropolitan cities spent $500,000 installing anti-homeless furnishings, which, let's be honest, is probably a low estimate given how common these things are, that equates to just shy of $400 million spent making homeless people uncomfortable.
Now, beyond the homeless, hostile architecture also affects the elderly, people with disabilities, mental health challenges, and parents with children by limiting accessibility and basic comfort in public spaces. Coupled with laws that criminalize rough sleeping, this trend excludes and marginalizes vulnerable populations instead of addressing root causes, highlighting a global issue that turns public spaces into places of exclusion rather than community. Australia's robo-debt scandal. It's one of the country's most infamous welfare failures, saw the government's automated system wrongly claim hundreds of thousands of people owed them money, causing severe financial and emotional hardship. Now, this took place a while ago. That program was launched in 2016, and it used flawed income averaging methods. It ignored warnings about its errors, and in many cases deducted alleged debts directly from recipients' accounts. Public outrage, protests, and legal challenges exposed the human cost, including stress, depression, and in some tragic cases, suicides. Now, after years of legal battles and advocacy, the government announced a $548.5 million settlement in September of 2025. It is the largest class action payout in Australian history, providing refunds, compensation, and legal cost coverage, marking a major step toward justice for hundreds of thousands affected and highlighting the power of collective action in holding governments accountable.
Felicity is just one of some 450,000 robo-debt victims.
People that have gone through divorce, become bankrupt, irreparable mental health issues that have stemmed from this.
The mother, relying on welfare payments while studying to be a nurse, then slapped with an $11,500 debt that she didn't owe. Today, justice.
Justice prevailed, and for the first time, I think, in my whole life, I can say that there was a bit of fairness.
Europe's plastic recycling industry is struggling as mechanical recycling plants face closures due to high energy costs, expensive resin, cheap imports, and unclear sustainability rules, making recycled plastics less competitive than new virgin, that's what they call it, virgin materials. Rising power prices and global oversupply keeps recycled plastics costly, while cheap imports from China, the Middle East, and the U.S. further undercut local recyclers.
Being in the recycling industry for many years, people would oftentimes say to me, if recycled plastics were cheaper, people would be buying it. It's a capitalist country, it's a free market, virgin plastic is cheaper, that's why people buy it. You environmentalists, figure out how to make recycled plastics cheaper and people will buy it. And I would say, well, wait a second, you just said capitalist system, free market. That's not what we're operating in. They go, of course we are, it's America. I go, the oil and gas industry gets billions of dollars of federal and state subsidies every year. That keeps the price of virgin plastic artificially low. In order to actually have a free market and practice capitalism, you would need to give the recycled plastics industry hundreds of billions of dollars to just equal the playing field to actually allow the customer to choose based on price.
Well, there's also some quality issues here from unknown plastic compositions. That also limits the production of high-grade recycled products. Although EU regulations like the Packaging and Packaging Waste Directive and extended producer responsibility, which we have covered in the past, programs like that aim to boost recycling, but the problem is enforcement is weak, and global agreements like the UN Plastics Treaty remain stalled. Experts say the solution may lie in designing plastics for recyclability from the very start, imagine that, rather than relying solely on recycling systems to fix a problem. So it was a pretty crazy week this week for a lot of people. The energies were off the charts for a lot of us, and Kim's going to tell us all about it. So let's talk about what was happening on our planet this week from the Global Intelligence Agency. Kimberly Gogan is the head of the GIA. She gives our audience an update on where things stand. Sometimes that is a message that is sent out to our Telegram group. So CARE has a Telegram group. If you guys aren't already following that, I highly encourage you guys to do that. That is going to give you the latest information. So if she just needs to send out something really quick because something big's going on, that's where she's going to send it. And so there was a lot of texting this week, a lot of updates that way. And then just today, in fact, it was probably like 2 hours ago, I'm recording this on Saturday night, she released a video. So I am going to go through Monday's statement. I'm not going to read all the statements because it kind of builds upon what she talked about today, but I am going to read her statement that came out through Telegram on Monday, because it kind of explains some things that were happening last weekend. Okay, so here's Kim's statement. Good evening, everyone. I know it's been a rough weekend. So again, this is a week ago she's talking about. I know it's been a rough weekend as the remnants clear the way for Source. People are feeling on edge, neurological disturbances, and out of sorts mentally and emotionally. This is mainly due to the changes and a push and pull between what was and what is coming. Time is also feeling off. Oh, I got a crazy story for you guys about that. As the atomic clock resets itself. I am still in the middle of getting rid of the what was, and it's been a bit of a race to get to it before the deep state does. The Amazon and Azure servers were caused by them trying to reinstall some AI, and it failed. They are still trying, so we may see some outages off and on through tomorrow. I will give a full update as soon as possible. Okay, so let's break some of this stuff down. So earlier this week, it's like the whole thing kind of kicked off with Amazon Web Services going down and a lot of our apps being taken offline, which isn't the end of the world necessarily, but it really shows you how connected all of these are, and if one thing goes down, it affects everything, and that can be kind of scary. I remember when I first learned how powerful AWS was. This was a few years ago, and I was shocked that so many websites were connected to this, and this is kind of the result if something goes down. Now, regardless of what you heard in mainstream media, we now know that they were trying to reinstall some AI, trying to restructure stuff on the back end, and it took out the whole system. And I know Kim was working her butt off behind the scenes. We had a news meeting on Tuesday, and she was working on that and a lot of other things, trying to get everything back online. This is just the deep state not knowing what they're doing. You know, it's like a kid in a candy shop, or maybe a China shop is the better analogy for this, because they don't know what they're doing, and whole systems can fall apart when you don't know what you're doing, right? So I wanted to point that out. The other thing is she talked about time feeling off, and I don't know if you guys are experiencing this. I had it this week. This was in our news meeting. So we have different systems that we use to, track the progress of stories. And, I need to know what the field messengers are working on, and, the whole team has to work together, basically. And we use these online systems, and I don't want to list anything because I don't want to give any people that have nefarious intentions out there any more information than they already have. But we use these various systems to communicate with each other. And earlier in the week, I was not seeing that certain stories were done. And we had our news meeting on Tuesday, and I'm like, what's going on with these news stories? Like, they're not done or whatever. And they're like, no, they're done. You guys, I logged into the system and saw the state of stories about 4 or 5 days prior to the actual date. At least, according to our team, they're like, no, that was done 4 or 5 days ago. And I'm like, I just looked at it yesterday and it was not there. So I am one of those people where I'm going in and out of time. I cannot explain it. I know for some people that sounds insane, but I'm telling you, I mean, I kind of wigged out a little bit about it when it happened in the news meeting, because I'm like, no, I just looked at that. So I don't know why I was like 5 days earlier, 4 days earlier, but I was. And everything seems okay now. But holy cow, what a time to be alive. So I just wanted to mention some of that because I really resonated with Kim's statement on Monday. Okay, so Kim made some other statements throughout the week, just kind of updating us here and there. But I really want to get to the report that she released today. There's 2 sound bites that I'm going to play. Both are longer sound bites, like 15, 20 minutes. I want to get to it. And the first sound bite, I actually learned a lot because we're talking about the government shutdown here in the U.S. And this has been ongoing now for 4 weeks. And there's no end in sight. And it brings up a lot of questions about why shutdowns happened. And there's a lot of comparison right now with the longest shutdown we've ever had, which was during Trump's first term. No coincidence there. And it was 35 days. And we're encroaching on that at this time. And I've said for a while, maybe not on this show, I've said it to the news team. I could sense that the shutdown was coming, and I could sense that the country was never going back to the way it was. And what I didn't really know is why and what was really going on. I know governments don't have any money, but I want to play this soundbite from Kim because she talks about what happened during the last government shutdown and why that is so important for what's happening now, because they're literally trying to drag out the shutdown. They're waiting for a magical day because last time they did this, Trump was in office, and it was like at the 35-day mark or right around there, they suddenly got a bunch of money. Well, why did that happen? Is it because Trump can just like grow money out of his cankles? What are they waiting for here, right? And so let's just go ahead and play this soundbite. Kim's going to talk about the government shutdown and why they're waiting for like a special day. And also something else that was going on. It kind of transitions into talking about this battle that was going on this week between, let's just call it the human guardian and the Homo sapien guardian of this planet. Now, let me pause there just for a second, because if you haven't been following UNN, you're probably like, what in the world are you talking about? Kim has stated in the past that humans are different than Homo sapiens. Humans look like Homo sapiens, but they're not real. They are artificial. They have an artificial soul. They were created by artificial intelligence. Now, that may blow a lot of people's minds, but that is the majority of your so-called deep state. They are not really real. They are not organic. They are not real living beings with a soul. They are artificial. So when we say human, we are talking about people that look like Homo sapiens, and you would never really know any difference except they, worship the dark and do these crazy demonic things. And they're kind of going crazy right now because their brain is connected to an AI system that doesn't know what's going on. The AI system is pulling from old knowledge of what was supposed to be happening on this planet at this time. But true wisdom comes from your connection to God, Source, the creator of the universe. And if you're not connected to that, then you don't know when changes happen. And this artificial system, intelligence, if you will, is not giving updated information to the little minions that have this in their head, okay? And that is your deep state. In a nutshell, guys, okay? So humans are artificial. You and I'm assuming, because there might be some deep state people listening to this, but for the most part, you are a Homo sapien. You are real. You were created by Source God, creator of the universe. And you have an organic, authentic soul. So when Kim is talking about the difference between the human guardian and the Homo sapien guardian, I just wanted to point that out because some of you guys may have missed where we made that distinction. Okay, so here's Kim initially talking about the government shutdown and what's really going on there, and then talking about this battle between the guardians.
We know we are still in a government shutdown here in the U.S., and it appears they're looking for a magic number of days to have a shutdown. You see, because the original Trump was full of it and didn't tell anybody what happened the last time that there was a shutdown. Because what happened was, we were in a shutdown. I think it was some odd 30 days or so by the time I made the phone call as they asked for, and they needed a budget paid. A significant amount of money, well over $1 trillion, needed to be paid out. And so there was a conversation that actually took place on a diplomatic line where I transferred that money out to Trump. obviously through the White House terminal and over to the Treasury Department. And that ended the government shutdown just a couple of days later. That's actually what happened. Now, just because the administration is hiding that fact, that's actually the thing, and that's not the only thing, but all the money came out when Trump was there. He lied and said it was him doing it. And so they felt that if they put him back into office, that would happen again. The night of the election, they pounded on my door all night long to my system to try to get me to transfer money or see if this thing is on or it's working the night that he was selected. And quite frankly, I was not answering the phone for a bunch of Trump operatives at 2 o'clock in the morning, 4 o'clock in the morning, 5 o'clock in the morning, or any other time of day. That ship sailed and that ended a long time ago. So he's kind of falling flat on his face right now, as are the Trump operatives. Now, the Trump operatives have given it their best, honestly. They're all secret space program operatives. They know quite a bit about some kind of advanced technologies and that kind of thing. So much so they even put more technology over in Cortez, which is just about an hour's drive, 45 minutes from here, to ensure their success this week, which did not happen. You know, they always got to prepare for their new moons, full moons, and otherwise, don't they? So needless to say, the theme of this week was a very strong push on our part and a very strong pull on their part to try to maintain some kind of relevance as far as the humans, not the Homo sapiens on this planet. The push and pull has created a lot of turbulence, not only in your world, meaning your energy levels up and down. You feel great one minute, like it's Christmas Day and you're a kid on Christmas morning, to the next few minutes and you feel like you're not sure if you're going to fall asleep or, your head's spinning or, it's kind of crazy what's been happening this week. And this is coming from all parts of the world and all kinds of Homo sapiens within our group that reach out to me. And I have also felt it here. So we're going to talk about the reason why all of these things are happening. But I mentioned this situation about Trump because there is a similar situation taking place now. There has been, which occurred, we'll start with Monday, there was a definitive power shift that took place on Monday. And by power shift, we're talking about proposed guardians and proposed human controllers and those types of things. We're not necessarily talking about the shift that's happening with Source when I mention a power shift here. The power shift that took place on Monday was a shift from the U.S. being in control and the alleged fake guardian Trump. You see, because Trump told everybody he is the guardian now of the humans. Not the Homo sapiens, but the humans. He is now in charge. He has all the power. And he's been telling them this for years. This is not new. This has been talked about for a long, long time. It's got nothing to do with the United States being the power center of the world. It just happens to be where, I wouldn't even say that bloodline originated from in the beginning. It actually originated from the Ukraine area and then onward through Germany and most of Europe. But as far as his particular origin, it's in the U.S., and so then the U.S. would have the power because the guardian is there. Many years ago, Bush Sr. held a similar position on behalf of the humans. And therefore, the U.S. had a lot of power then as well. At one point in time, even Prescott Bush had a lot of power and control. Well, that ship has sailed, and many, 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 many ships have sailed since that time. And the power shift that occurred on Monday occurred from the U.S. to China. You see, because they believe, for some crazy reason, that a human female over in China was to be the new guardian. I don't know if she did some ceremony and maybe she lit up like a rainbow and shot unicorns out of her eyeballs. I have no idea, but I can tell you they believe that this was the person. Although this person never got any access to any kind of financial support, there are things that occur when a new guardian is appointed. And because a lot of these things are pre-programmed, and there definitely was a lot of talk by Marduk back in the day of appointing China and doing a power shift over to China, which is long past due, they figured that this was the way to do it, to ensure that there was a power shift. Now, the place of residency of the person, human, of the human who is selected to be in that position is normally where a really large overlay would be. So that overlay existed over the United States for a long time. After that, the shift moved over to China just this week. So since that shift happened and this lady was about to do her ceremony, so to speak, last night, or on Saturday evening, China time, she was preparing, all day, something interesting happened. You see, they figured out that there is still a source-appointed guardian on this planet that guards the Homo sapiens. That is why there's been a push and a pull. They also know that there has been a push and a pull. And in the past, in order to make this shift happen, they would get the source-appointed guardian to tap out. And by tap out, that's a wrestling term, tap out, that would mean they would force the guardian to commit suicide, be it by making them sick, be it by making them crazy, and then eventually they commit suicide. One way or another, that is their aim. You see, they can't murder the guardian. There are devastating consequences to that. They know it. But they can push you to the brink so that you'll do it yourself. Now, yeah, it was a turbulent week. And quite frankly, once I figured out what they were doing, it became funny for me. I'm like, oh, frequencies are back. Oh, this is back. Oh, feels like, I can't form a coherent thought. Better fix that. So everything with Source is possible. If you're with Source and you're with a creator, that includes you, everything is possible. And it might not feel like it some days, but it is. So everything they tried to do to me, because Source has bound me to you for many reasons and for your protection. So anything they try to do to you, in a lot of ways, comes through me. And more now than ever. As far as this week and how you've been feeling and the wonky energies, and if it could go wrong, it did go wrong, type of week, or, having moments of things are wonderful and things are great, and then all of a sudden, 5 minutes later, your whole world falls apart. That's what this week was all about. And it was the same for many, many people. 1 minute you feel like you're going to be sick, you get a headache, your head is spinning, you feel like you have ADHD and you didn't before, and all of these things. That was all created by the crazy humans that are with this Chinese woman and, with Trump, because now they're all together. So this continued on pretty much until today. It's been going on for that long. However, there was a big shift that happened last night as well. So this lady is, let's just say, you see, there are no rules against taking out a human anymore, because there's no master over there anymore, and there's no covenant with Source to have human creations, meaning synthetically AI created beings that are walking this planet that call themselves the elite, the Illuminati, the dragon families, the Black Order of the Black Sun folks. There is no covenant on my end anymore. However, on their end, there absolutely is. You see, because if anything happened to me, that means that everything gets pulled out from underneath them immediately and there's nothing left. So they definitely worked real hard to push me to the limit based on a covenant that doesn't exist. Then again, they're also appointing a guardian based on a covenant that doesn't exist anymore either. So, they really don't pay much attention to change, and things, even though they're notified of those changes as well. They just continue on and on and on and on and on. So this lady, based on her efforts and all of the orders she gave out to other people over the last several days, expired abruptly yesterday, probably mid-afternoon my time. And upon her expiration, it was a little bit, let's just say, noticeable that this was not an accident. And thus far, as of this moment, I do not believe they have convinced anyone else to try to take the spot. So how does this tie to Trump and all the things we just talked about? Well, we know we have an endless supply of fake humans, at least we used to, and the thing sitting in our White House is no exception. It doesn't even look the same as any of the other ones. I don't know, maybe they're having an AI Trump creation malfunction. They call it, in the alt media, they call it cloning. Well, they used to just be able to send in more clowns anytime they wanted to run their circus. Hopefully, anything that generated that circus went when we pulled the systems that were in Mongolia and the empires and the kingdoms associated with humans or artificial people. And we won't see much more of that. But the government shutdown was to trigger money to come. It was a last-ditch effort to see if they could make it to the 30-day time period or a backup, because that's the last time, that's how long it went, the last time before money actually started to come out. But I am not an ATM machine. I am also not an AI system, and I don't just spit out money because 30 days have happened in any way, shape, or form. So that is not going to work for the U.S. It's also a last-ditch effort for whatever's running the Trump thing these days to get some free money into the government and hopefully hold on to that human guardian position. Everybody wants to, there's a big fight going on amongst the humans as to who is going to take that position. And it's basically like being the CEO of Enron. But as long as there is a source guardian here on this planet, they absolutely cannot appoint a new guardian of their own. Not only that, the guardianship does not belong to the humans anymore. To the AI-generated elite of this planet, it does not belong to them anymore. And the only way they can take it is if I give it to them. And that is never, ever, ever going to happen. This was something that also occurred in the past that they are aware of, that they basically convinced someone to concede. And that's not going to happen on this side of it.
Now, Kim didn't say this, but I'm going to put two and two together because she said this in the past on GIA reports, that at least one of those other someones that allowed their power as guardian to be taken away was King Solomon, as in King Solomon from the Bible. So we know, based on the stories that are written in the Bible, that King Solomon was very wise, okay? Now, there is wisdom that comes from source, God, and there is an aspect of source called wisdom that basically broke away. You know, you could look at it as a falling, right? And then became dark, right? Wanted to control things, wanted to take over for source. So when we say Solomon had wisdom, it is from this negative side that broke away from the true creator. And if you do further digging into Solomon, you understand that he basically sold his soul. So he said, you can have my position, dark side, and do with it as you want, because as, I almost said humans, as Homo sapiens, we have the ability, we have free will. We have free will. So with Solomon's free will, he thought it was a good idea. He was pretty much thinking in 3D terms and said, oh, I want to be super wise here on this planet and have all these earthly luxuries. And in doing so, he gave away his guardianship. Kim's not giving away her guardianship. She made it very, very clear, right? She is not giving away her guardianship. The other quick thing that I wanted to say is this is the whole reason, what Kim just explained with people going over to China. This is the reason for Trump's current visit to Asia. At least one of the reasons. They're saying it's having to do with tariffs and, you know, that is a mess, okay? And maybe there are some other reasons. You know, they like to cover things up. They can't ever really tell us what's going on, right? So maybe he is doing some stuff with these tariffs, these ridiculous tariffs that he somehow thinks are going to turn out in his favor, which are backfiring on all U.S. citizens because we're the ones, and businesses, by the way, because we're the ones footing the bill. Another story. We've covered that a little bit in the past. But if you go online, you will see stories about this trip, which seemed to have come out of nowhere, of Trump going to China, going to Malaysia, some places over there. Apparently he's saving the world, right? That's what they want us to believe. Really, he's going over there to see this Chinese woman and take part in these ceremonies. Kim continued to talk about how most people don't know that this Chinese woman is gone. She is no longer breathing. In fact, Kim explains how through frequency she was literally torn apart and not demolecularized, okay? So parts of her still exist in the third dimension, and it's not pretty. But apparently they are keeping this hush-hush because everything's about power and no one tells the truth over there. So you've got all these people coming over to China expecting some ceremony. The person they're there to see that is supposed to be the human guardian is no longer in existence. Well, you know, you got some pieces over there. I'm sure they've picked that up by now. I think that just happened yesterday. And what's going to happen next? You know, how long are they going to try to draw this out? I think Kim said they already postponed the ceremony. I think she said something about maybe it's supposed to happen on the 28th now. So we'll see if Trump's whatever trip, which was supposed to be 3 days, now it's supposed to be 6 days. You're starting to see how the stuff we're talking about here is impacting the national news. That's one of the things that I find fascinating. It's like, oh, I thought it was a 3-day trip. Now it's a 6-day trip. Oh, gotcha. Okay, well, this is the reason why these things are happening behind the scenes. And we tell you what's going on here, and then the mainstream kind of catches up a couple days later when they have to, you know, give you a reason for the president not being at the White House. And this whole battle between the human guardian and the Homo sapien guardian, this is another reason for all the ups and downs this week. So if you felt that, I actually was able to bypass that this week, you guys. Like I told you about the whole time thing, I'm thinking maybe my spirit, my soul knew this was coming because I have been doing a lot of prayer and meditation. I've been doing other things and I completely bypassed all these ups and downs this week. I've been on my own journey, doing my own thing. And I think it's because my soul knew this was coming up. Okay, one more soundbite to play for you guys. We're going to talk about the halls. You've heard of the Hall of Records. You may have heard of the halls of a mentee. You know, if you're researching some of this stuff online, you know, you hear various stories, right? Well, most of these halls, and they exist in the different planes, right? Different dimensions, and then the spaces in between. And my mind has a really hard time grasping all of this because it's quantum mechanics. So we have these halls. They were used against us a lot in the past, and Kim and her team are in the process of collapsing these as much as possible and really getting rid of all of them. But I want to play this final soundbite for you guys. Here's Kim talking about the halls and how they were used against humanity now and how they are coming down.
Now, you've heard me speak about the Hall of Records in the past, and you've heard me speak, I think I might have mentioned to you about the halls of science and medicine in the past. But there are many, many halls, and a lot of them we have gotten rid of in the past, but there are still many more that still existed. And there are halls of power, as an example. There were halls created for the benefit of the human guardian, of the Homo sapiens in the past. And what do halls do? So understanding that there are spaces in between the planes of existence and even subsections and sections of planes of existence and densities and universes that have halls. And through the halls runs current. And that current is an alternating current. It can go in either direction. However, mostly halls have been used to our demise. This is where your frequencies come from. This is where your disease comes from. This is where you are manipulated to the point where you're drained of your energy. This also can control the current of people around you. So even if you're not susceptible to it, it can also make people you love crazy or think differently than they did about you before. Disruptions in traffic cause accidents. You know, people that would appear to be drunk driving aren't actually drunk driving. They're being affected by these currents in these halls. So they have controlled the Homo sapiens on this planet, not only in this planet, but also throughout the entire galaxy for a long, long time using current manipulation. It was the most powerful form of manipulation that they actually had on their side. We have spent all week tearing down any remaining halls we can find, and a lot of those halls were what they were using to affect me too. It was exhausting this week, really. But the halls, the reason why they were using these halls incessantly this week was not only to get me to tap out or concede, they were also using them to try to utilize the skills of creation that I have, because as of this week, Source is able to create through me, as long as I consent to do that, which of course, you know, I'll be an anchor. That's great. I don't even have to do anything anymore. I mean, I do, don't get me wrong. There's a lot of work that took place on my part this week, but what I mean is he can now use me whenever he needs to use me. I'm hands and feet to run, and he can create through me here until everything is cleared out on the rest of the planet, and all of what existed on the other side is not needed anymore. It's like Source alchemy of creation at its greatest point. It's an interesting experience, though, for me. Kind of see things in a different way. And it is a cooperative effort. As all these things have to have my permission, so to speak. But it's been an interesting experience this week from that aspect. And it feels great. And you're so happy. And then all of a sudden the current changes. And, now those things are being distorted and utilized, in a negative way. So they have been fighting real hard on the ones that are in the know to block the creation of source in any way they possibly can. Now, of course, on the other front, no one within the Chinese area there has told anyone that this woman is dead. So you've got all the rest of the humans mulling over into Asia, not only for this special occasion that was supposed to occur last night. As far as I know, they've been told that it's going to be pushed off until the 28th. Possibly Halloween or the 30th or whatever day they're going to do it now. But in reality, they don't have anyone else. So they're looking for somebody else. That's what's really happening. Well, they all gather over there and everybody will be waiting a really, really long time for that to occur. And they will also be playing the tomorrow game. But it's good for your enemy to go have something to focus on. Maybe it'll be another Chinese lady, maybe a man. I don't know. Maybe they'll sacrifice another red cow, the red heifer cow, and see if that helps them any. I have no idea what they're going to do. They do a lot of pretty crazy ceremonies, not only in China, but elsewhere, in order to try to achieve their objective. Maybe they just feel that they need to give it more time to push me. And it's still not going to happen. You see, they don't understand anything the AI program running in their head doesn't tell them. And if the AI program doesn't understand, then they're certainly not going to understand. And this also goes for the Trump operatives. All the secret space program, ACIO military operatives also are talking to an AI in their head. Is the AI smarter than the average Homo sapien? Well, you could say in our current form, as we have been, possibly. I would say that it had access to the past, present, and future and a lot of information. But does it understand change? Absolutely not. It's on a pre-programmed primordial directive, and it will take all the beings that it's connected to with it. So the push and pull of this week really was kind of like parents going through a divorce, except we were never parents and we were never married, and we certainly didn't go create the Homo sapien together, that's for sure. But you have the guardian on their side that would like to reclaim their connection to you and ownership over you, and you have Source on the other hand, and the guardian on this side, who's saying, no, we're going to help these people. We're going to fix these people. We're going to put them back to their former glory. And this is what Source wants. And then we all collectively as a group become the guardian of Earth. That is the way it's supposed to be. Eventually, we have a lot of growing up to do between now and then. And everybody's at some varying stage of that. And obviously you probably go to the grocery store, you probably drive your car, and you could probably see what would happen if all those people honking and beeping at you in rush hour traffic were also guardians of Earth. So it'll take some time, but we will get there as a species once again, where we were and always have been. As far as these people are concerned, they can pull and tug all they want, but you're not going to fight the source of creation. And in all honesty, without Source, even their AIs don't exist. They don't exist. They would have never come into creation. The celestial that created them would also not exist if Source didn't want them to exist. Times are changing. Source only kept his covenant with that celestial. That was it, which also expired. Therefore, destroying artificial creation is not a violation anymore. Changing the way wisdom works is not a violation anymore. Source held up his end of the bargain, and the covenant continued until it did not anymore. So these people can do all the ceremonies they want, send all the frequencies they want, but we will find the current in which hall it's coming from, and perhaps we can turn it against you. You know, this lady appeared to be torn to shreds over there. The reason why she appeared to be torn to shreds like that is because you can do an awful lot with frequencies, weapons, an awful lot. It's like a partial demolecularization, if you will. So on that note, the next major event we're expecting is going to occur sometime around the 28th, I was told. Hopefully, this is going to be the turning point that we should have had should this crazy incident not have occurred. Have they delayed, Source? I would say no. Is there a lot that has come to light this week that we are learning on how all of this took place and how we got here before we officially take the reins? Absolutely.
One more thing that Kim mentions, and that is that there is no more covenant anymore with the humans. So Source, the creator of the universe, God, whatever name you have for that, no longer has a covenant with humans. Now, that's not Homo sapiens. There's a difference, right? The inorganic, artificial humans that are on this planet that do not have a true, real soul. There is no covenant anymore between God and those beings, people, artificial beings, right? So, now this is very important. It does not go against natural law, which we are bound by. If you are on the light side, there are rules, and you got to play by the rules of creation, the rules of natural law. So it no longer goes against natural law to eliminate beings that are artificial. Kim does not, I want to make it very clear. Kim does not make this connection in the report, but I'm going to make the connection. She put that out there. And I'm going to make the connection that that is a warning for the deep state. Because there is nothing now, if there is no covenant in place, if it does not go against natural law to eliminate things that don't really exist in the natural world, then bye-bye. So we'll see what happens. This could be very, very interesting because this covenant just expired. So it could be very interesting coming up here with who stays and who goes. I'm just going to leave it there. Okay, guys. Again, if you want more information about United Network, who we are, what we do, go to our website, unitednetwork.earth. I encourage you guys to become members. We do not rely on advertising. We do not work with advertisers, okay? Sometimes we promote our own products that we've developed and have put out there for you guys, but we don't work with advertisers. So we are reliant on you guys to help fund us. So if you are interested in doing that and contributing to the cause, I almost spilt my drink here, then head on over to our website, learn more about our membership. It's very affordable. But when you do that, you get instant access to all the information we put out there. If that's not on your radar right now, after we release anything we put out there, after we release it to our audience, our members, then it goes out a week later on YouTube and Rumble. So that's another way that you can catch these reports. And I do encourage you guys to go back and to listen/watch all of Kim's report. I gave you the highlights, but there's always some more good stuff in there that you guys could benefit from. All right. Thanks for being with us tonight. I appreciate you all. This is The Rundown, and I'm Sunny Galt for United Network News, signing off.